morning, everybody. The session this morning is about process and perfect process for designing technology. We're sponsored by System 7 at this session. We have Andrew here from System 7. They do a really nice job of designing lighting and lighting control and shading systems for properties across the country. And what I want to accomplish today is really talk about not just how that's done, but why it's done that way. I think that if COVID taught us nothing, it's that remote work works. That we actually can work outside of our markets. We can do a good job managing projects from a distance. There are tools that we have at our disposal and processes we can create to make it easier. And we can get better outcomes. So we have, as builders, you have the luxury of hiring a professional from a different market, because you might get the outcome that you want specific to a particular project and not be limited by geography as to who your technical design folks would be. Sound about right?
It does. Sounds great.
All right.
So
before you get started, flip the slide forward for me there. Why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Andrew Cuoco. I've been in the lighting industry for about 8 years. I work for System 7. And so in New England, we're a design build firm, but nationally we're a design firm. So we kind of see all sides of it. And we focus a lot on process. So that's why I'm here.
Great.
And, I'm Greg Hardwick. I'm a custom builder out of Orlando, Florida. I know several of you guys for being at a number of these. So
Awesome.
about all I got.
Thanks. So we're going to focus on lighting today, and I think it's interesting that this is what you focus on as a company as well. Lighting's changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it's changed an awful lot in the last 3 years, probably. Fixtures are different. Fixture sizes and shapes are different. Fixture performance is different. Everyone here has seen a presentation or a pitch on circadian rhythm lighting or biophilic lighting design or RGBW, whatever term you prefer to use. Motorized shading is proliferating. I think that it's hard to see a luxury house anymore without a handful, if not a full house full of motorized shades involved. And lighting design is increasingly more important. So do you think that sort of drives the beginning of this process and the conversation?
Definitely. I mean, I think that lighting used to be a commodity. It used to be like buying a 2x4, right? It's not like that anymore. It's a specified product. There's tons of choices you have to make before you can even purchase a fixture. So it's something that is new to, first-time buyers for sure, but it's something that's new for even people where they're, building their third home or their fourth home, right? Because it just changes so fast.
Are you getting a lot of requests for lighting consultations early on, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the days when we were just trying to figure out recessed cans and converting those over to LEDs, and then we had issues with them dimming at different things, and then we started learning about color temperature and stuff like that. So it's really come a long way, since I've been building custom. But now, when you get in these really higher end homes, you find that the clients really are, light is very, very important to them. And they start asking for a lot of new and creative things.
So I assume that probably complicates the process a little bit. You've got to figure out how to get there. How do I get not just a design together, but how do I coordinate the process, which is why we've got you here today, Andrew.
Oh.
Exactly. So this is probably the most important part of our process. And we spent a lot of time developing how we do this initial meeting. All the way to the point where we develop, proprietary software and things like that, which I'm going to show you guys a little bit later. But for you guys, it's like, when do you start talking about lighting, right? And one of the problems that we run into all the time is that, these decisions with lighting affect other infrastructures in the house, right? And people spend a lot of time, planning their MEP systems, but not when they're picking their lights, right? People pick their countertops before they pick their lighting fixtures. And when they get into a situation where they see all of this new technology out there and the infrastructure in the house isn't there to support this technology, people get disappointed, right? So, when do you want to engage someone in, the technology side or even the lighting side? And it really comes down to as soon as possible. Right? I say like a 60% design development set, right? Because these things affect head-end locations, that constant battle of fighting over mechanical space. They affect the wiring in the walls. They affect the affect the control systems that need to be put in place. So, really, the earlier the better.
How would you qualify a client in that process? So you're talking to a customer about what they want to put into their homes. They're interested in lighting. How do you decide if it's appropriate to hire somebody in your role?
So that's a great question. And lighting can be really tough, right? Because a lot of things with lighting if you look at a lighting fixture spec sheet, right, you see that it has more lumen output or more, lower wattage or whatever it is. But what you don't see is the actual effect, right? And if you were to show someone a cut sheet of an expensive fixture and a cheap fixture, they're probably going to pick the cheap one, right? Because they both look the same. They're recessed cans in the ceiling, right? But the reality is that can drastically affect the environment. And so that education process in the beginning is hugely important. And it's something, it's a lot of terms that people have never heard before, like lumen output and foot candles and all of this stuff. So we really have to kind of break this down into different levels of good, better, best, or, this fixture is $150. It's an entry-level fixture. This fixture is $450. It's a higher-end fixture. What's the actual difference, right? What does that mean for the final product of the home? And that can be a very difficult discussion. And it's something that we've found that you should really see in person. You should take the time to go to a showroom and step people through the process, because you never really know what they're going to value and what they're not going to value.
I'm going to go off script a little bit here, but it's probably a good conversation. So I know the answer, but I want you to tell me the answer. The difference between, say, a halo fixture from Home Depot versus a open housing recess fixture from a higher end manufacturer.
A lot of it's flexibility, field adjustability, right? Changing beam angles, different trim options, things like that. But I would say probably the most important factor is low glare. That fixture is typically sitting higher above the ceiling plane, and it just creates an experience where you actually have more light and less glare, which is just a higher level of finish and something that people tend to value. But it's not something that you can pick up on a cut sheet.
So, Greg, there's been a transition in the industry. It's been slow coming, but moving from having an integrator take care of 100% of a project to sort of taking out pieces like the design and the engineering portions, where there's actually dedicated technical designers. Is there an advantage to that type of person over an integrator in a situation like this?
We've run into that recently on several homes, and where is the people who are interested in lighting and care about lighting as a homeowner? Where do you find that expertise? And we've tried the interior designer, and it's like, yeah, okay, they know how to wall wash and do artwork and stuff like that, but they don't really know the technical aspects of what you're actually going out and purchasing and putting together. Is it the salesperson at the lighting dealer? Well, yeah, I mean, they know a little bit about this brand and that brand and what really cool lighting is, but they're not lighting experts. So, and the architect, right? The architect, they're just trying to put an electrical plan together, to get you ready for permitting. They're not providing that expertise either. So, recently, we've actually had clients reach out and say, "Hey, do you guys have a lighting expert that we can talk to get this right?" And fortunately, we were able to find one, but for, the first time I was asked that, I was like, "Oh yeah, we'll just go to the lighting store." And it was like, that's not what we're looking for. So finding this skill, this piece of the problem solving is very, very important as people move into more technical and, complicated lighting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times someone comes to me with an RCP and it's just circles on the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And they say, "Is this a good lighting design?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I have no idea what this is." Like, that's like saying, this is a car. Well, what kind of car? Like, what are you trying to accomplish here, right? And, if you look at an RCP and you see that everything's in a perfect grid, chances are it's not a good RCP, right? Unless you're obsessed with vacuuming, you don't have to light just the floor, right? You want to light stuff. It has to have a purpose, right? And so that's something that I run into all the time. And, an architect might really like their design. So it's always kind of managing the different players in the game, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're an integrator in the New England area, but you also design systems across the country.
Right.
So have you found in your experience, since you've sort of worked on both sides of this fence, that as an integrator, clients are a little more resistant to bring you on early because it's a commitment, right? So they're committing to buying products from you, to spending money with you, and they haven't really defined what they're purchasing yet, versus being a designer where you have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've solved that is we've essentially combined the two together. So, we offer a matrix of services and products, right? And people can choose a la carte what they want to do. And that kind of eases that buying tension, so we can say, hey, we'll put a design together for what you want, and if you like it, we can go further. And if you, decide you want to go shop it out and do whatever you want to do, that's fine too. We try to go in with an all-inclusive budget. So what that means is it's not just, if we're talking about shades, right? It's not just the shade, it's the wire, it's the programming, it's the installation, it's everything. So people get an all-inclusive number right up front where they can see how that bottom line affects their project as a whole. And that's been hugely beneficial.
And how do you do that? Is it historical data? Is it a...
So we spent a lot of time and invested in a proprietary software that allows us to do that. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but essentially we can just drag and drop icons and people can watch their budget grow. And it takes this design.
Watch the budget grow.
Watch.
And this, process takes, a month-long design process down to an hour, 2 hours, right? And people are in the driving seat. They can say, hey, you know what, let's step down in here, or let's step it up in here, whatever they want to do.
Awesome.
So that initial consultation, excuse me, is really about education, right? And it takes that sales pressure completely off the whole process.
All right, let's move on to the next step in the process.
Team collaboration. This again kind of falls into that upfront bucket of we're not necessarily building stuff yet, but we want to nail down who's doing what. And I find that specifically when dealing with integrators, this is a really important process because everybody has things that they do and they don't do, right? Some people are running low voltage wires, some people aren't. And establishing clear deliverables with what you're going to do is very important. And not only for us to make sure our client's happy, but also for other people so they can incorporate this into the budgets as well.
So how important is that for you? I assume it's a time-saving thing if you get someone coordinating all these efforts.
Right. Yeah, it's the collaboration part that you got to get beyond right now, because like I said, you have a architect who loves all their gridded out, recessed cans down halls and all this other stuff, and then you have your interior designers on a separate team that think they've had everything figured out for years now, and you actually bring in a lighting expert. And what we've had to do, because we have one, we're about to start, is just let the normal process kind of go forward into construction drawings, while we have these consultants kind of in the background continuing to refine the design. And then we plan on just doing a revision, after we get the drawings back. But I think, as these roles and these experts that you have to bring in for these more higher end, complicated jobs, progress, hopefully these architects and interior designers and stuff like that are saying, okay, who's your lighting designer? And they're already, they already know that this is something that's going to have to be brought in, and that expertise, brought into the project. So right now, so we're involved in a project right now, and right now it's like, okay, we got to send everything out to everybody to make sure everybody sees what they're doing. And I guarantee you the architect's ignoring 90% of what we're sending them right now. So hopefully this collaboration, gets a little more solid.
So who is the alpha in that situation where you've got some overlap and competing interests, where you've got a lighting designer and an interior designer, and what happens when the client doesn't commit to the interior design community right away, or doesn't have all the professionals at the table at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, it stagnates, right?
Yeah.
The design process stagnates because they're interested in this stuff and they want to do it. And they see it and they travel all over the world, and then they come back and they want to do cool stuff in their house, and it gets stagnated because you don't have. But I would say in the 2 jobs that we've done recently, this one that we're about to start, the architect is the one that wants to be driving everything. And then after he's done with his stuff, if we want to change some things, we can. But there's really no good way where we are right now to insert this into the process far enough ahead to get buy-in from the architect and stuff. At the same time, they're signing their contract with the owner. So it's got to get a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would second that.
Yeah.
It's always tough to find who the most important person on the job is, and I usually, in that consultation, I ask who you're working with, and usually the first person they say is the most important one, whether it's the builder or the architect or whoever, but that's a key kind of like, okay, this is who I'm sending these initial budgets to, But, it also falls into, sometimes there's surprises, right? Like even if someone's working with a lighting designer, 90% of the time a lighting designer is not providing fixtures, right? And these people are artists, right? They live in this weird world of physics and art, and they're trying to combine these things together. And a lot of times they're not really thinking about budget, right? So this client is paying this lighting designer to do this gorgeous design for them, and they do it. And then that designer, is like, okay, I'm done. And the client's like, well, where do I get these fixtures? And the electrician's like, well, I'll do it. And then they get this huge bill, and they're like, this is nuts, right? So it's really important to kind of nail down on the onset, like, let's manage these budgets and let's coordinate this all together and make sure everybody's on the same page.
So you're quarterbacking that process, though?
Yeah, I mean, in New England, where people can procure product from us, right? So we can design a system, and then we can also facilitate the purchase of those fixtures. So we have that all under one roof, which has been really beneficial. But a lot of times we're working on jobs with lighting designers, so that's not coming into play. And maybe we're just providing fixtures or something like that. So we're kind of used to managing that ambiguity, and that's one of the reasons why we exist. But it's definitely a problem.
So I know a little bit later on you're going to be talking about your process and some of your actual, I guess your methods of doing what you do. What are some deliverables? What are the things that as a designer you're going to give to the design team, the builder, along the way to sort of move this thing along?
Yeah, I mean, what we've found is that most people in the technology industry don't subscribe to that standard construction process, right? And it's really about providing, a scope and budget set. It's about providing a design development set. It's about providing construction drawings. And we follow that to a T, right? And that's not something that a lot of people do. But within each of those deliverables are, clear set items of information that we're going to be providing, whether that's circuiting or, it's really whatever the client's signing up for, right? But because that's an a la carte process, they've decided that and they know what they're getting.
Okay, and this leads right into the next slide there, which is how do you not just coordinate with the trades who are actually responsible for doing the work, but how do you manage change through the process as a designer? So how do you handle that beast?
Yeah, that's a big one. And what we've done is we assign projects a project manager for the life of their project, just like any other subcontractor, right? And they're responsible for capturing changes. They're responsible for sending out drawing updates. They're responsible for ordering and delivering and scheduling and all of those things. So it's not the salesperson carrying on the job and pretending to be a project manager. This is a dedicated professional for the life of the project. And that's one way that we found can streamline the process a little bit. But like, even if you look at this photo here, right, like it just looks like a kitchen table, but if you look in the background, right, you have a drapery track, you have linear lighting, all right next to a window. And there's a lot going on in that ceiling right there. So it's, that was figured out in that design process, right? And it took a lot of work to get that done. So, hopefully by the time installation comes along, people are aware of lead times and installation and all that kind of stuff.
But let's say you're across the country designing this system, and that's happening 3,000 miles away from your desk. How do you coordinate that without being on site and make sure nothing goes?
Well, we would send a project manager. We'd send someone out there. And if that's not in the budget, then we're relying on on-site management, which can be a little bit scary, but that's kind of...
On-site management being the electrical contractor, the builder, the...
Usually the site super, something like that, the builder. But it can be, a lot of Zoom calls.
What's your experience been with working with people from out of town?
Well, I don't know if I have a good or bad experience with that, but I will tell you just in execution, I got to take a little bit of a step back because those final construction drawings and the planning that you have to do for drapery pockets, for shade pockets, for linear lighting, for wall lighting, for baseboard lighting, for floor lighting, all that. I mean, we don't want to figure that out on the job.
Right.
We want that all figured out ahead of time. We're sending truss drawings now to lighting people instead of just the architect and stuff. And then when you get the reflective ceiling plan from the interior designer, we got to make sure everybody's on board with that and everybody's interacting and providing that input, because we don't want to be figuring a lot of this stuff out while we're in construction, because again, that'll just stagnate it, and that's never good for what we do. So yeah, I mean, having a very complete set of design drawings, construction drawings, I think makes it a lot easier for us to be able to do this 3,000 miles away, and maybe we're just doing, periodic Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or something like that with pictures and photos and stuff like that, and helping out in that.
I mean, our drawings are huge, right? We spend so much time on drawings, and it's, not just, making sure that, dimensions are correct and everything like that. It's also making sure that all the information someone needs is on there, right? So, a one place where you can go and you can see a shade schedule and a lighting schedule and power requirements and signal requirements and load types for fixtures and everything. We spend a ton of time coordinating that. And, it's gotten to the point where I can now give this stuff to an electrician, and it takes, a week's worth of phone calls down to a 15-minute conversation. And that's, all of those details really, really matter.
So Greg, I'm going to go back to what you said a second ago. So as you evolved as a home builder, right, when you started, I'm guessing your first house, you probably did a lot of figuring out stuff on site. So you learned the hard way that that's probably not the best process because it's expensive. Have you ever quantified or qualified the costs of making decisions like that late in the game?
Well, I'm like a lot of the others in this room. I do cost plus, so I've learned my lesson on that with these types of homes. So that really resonates into a cost for the owner.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't have your design drawings, if you don't have your stuff together, or if you want to just design on the fly, it's going to take longer and it's going to cost you more money. So what that, I think that's project specific, to have to quantify, well, how much did it cost on this 6-month delay? But it costs money. It costs money, sweat, tears, friction, it's all these things, are costly. So
I see that a lot with developers too, because they're the client, right? And it's their dream that they're building and they're trying to sell it, but they might not necessarily have the end user's best interest involved. They don't know, right? They don't live in a $20 million house, right? So they don't know what these people actually really want. And their, budget's everything. So they're doing this stuff as quickly as they can. And when they get to the end of it and the client moves in and they're like, where are all my shades? It's like, well, we said that's probably a good idea, but you decided to save some money down the line, and then that client then has to foot the bill for, all this retrofit.
Yeah.
Do you have a designated milestone process built where you're telling your customers that these are the times we need this information, this is what we're going to need by that point, here's when we need your decisions? I guess the larger question is how much time is required on the customers, I guess in their day and their involvement, to get them to the point where you have enough information to be successful in your job?
It really depends how involved they want to be, right? Sometimes we get architects that have that magic stick that they just make every single decision. and sometimes the clients want to be really involved. So it really depends.
But what do you need? What do you need to be successful?
A lot of information. I mean, it's pretty continuous throughout the whole project. And it really depends on what the final goal is, right? I mean, you can, if it's just talking lighting fixtures, it's framing, it's, clearly defined budget, it's, who's buying the fixtures, what fixtures are buying, it just goes on and on and on.
But when you don't get those answers, it slows the project down and makes the builder unhappy. And
yeah, it makes everybody unhappy,
Yeah.
right? But if someone doesn't want to make a decision, then it's, it's on them, and you got to make that clear.
Let's shift gears a little bit into something that's sort of near and dear to my heart. So everybody's doing drawings on this job. You've got an interior designer doing drawings, an architect doing drawings, you're doing lighting drawings, you might have a lighting designer involved, there's a landscape architect doing drawings. The builder generally is going to sort of coordinate that effort because that's part of your job description. But the technology designer can't be successful without having some control over that. So how do you manage all of this? How do you make sure everybody's got the most recent set of drawings? I guess you can both talk about it. How do you make sure that your tech designer knows what happened at the last meeting he didn't attend? What's the best way to do this?
Well, what we've, the days of your framer coming in and picking up a paper set of plans, promising he was going to bring that back in 2 days with a bid, are long gone. Yeah. So we've moved to these online construction management systems where we can upload plans, we can add the lighting designer, the interior designer, the architect, and the owner kind of in this client realm where they can see and have the permissions to evaluate these drawings and check them out. You can redline them if you want and make notes. So it's kind of like that. We've moved to that cloud-based collaboration. You got to have everybody bought in on that, and we're still, trying to get that fully executed. I don't know if we ever will, but it's a lot better than it was, and even better than sending emails out to 8 different people and then getting an updated version the next day, and it's like, here's another one, here's another one. So if you can just upload the latest and greatest, in a cloud-based application that everybody has access to one set, the final set or the most complete set, that tends to work a little bit better for us.
So you come in and Greg's got this great system that you've never used before, and you've got your own process. That's something to work through, right?
Yeah, definitely. And, we see that a lot. We've been seeing that process a lot more, but we don't see it every time. And so, you got to make friends with people and figure out how they like it and how you want to deliver it. And, but, it's also who's showing what on what drawings, right? Because most projects, people are working off a couple different drawings. So it's figuring out what you're carrying on yours and what the architect's carrying on theirs. And most of the time we end up with, 2 sets of drawings that a builder's working off of and an electrician's working off.
All right, I think we can move on to the next one there.
So this was, I'm going to start at the end here, and you said, what does finished mean? And I thought about that, and I realized that I don't really have a clear answer, and it's really when the client says you're done, you're done. That was, I thought about that for a while. So, a big part of that is obviously making sure everything's installed, and it is what you said it was going to be. But another part of that is education, right? Like these are systems that have to be programmed. We have a specific process that we do pertaining to lighting control, right? Like we lay an overlay over the system or over the house, and the client lives with that for however long, and they call us back and we come in and make changes. And then after that, the systems that we provide, there's a lot of user end flexibility. So hopefully that's good enough for them. But a lot of times we're coming back and coming back and coming back, and it just kind of, it is what it is. And it's not just a line in the sand of when we're done, unfortunately. But.
Well, it feels like expectations are pretty important, right? So how do you define that? So, I was an integrator for a long time, and there were projects that I never left. I think I had lifetime clients, and when they pay, it's great. When they're not paying for that service, it's not so great. So, how do you define and set those expectations early? And Greg, what's your role in that?
That is an interesting thing because the program seems to go on forever. I can get a CO without the programming complete. right? It just all has to be inspected and installed. So, you know, what I hope we're not doing is having to move a bunch of lights around and all that other stuff. So hopefully that's all figured out, and we've solved the problem that they were asking us to solve in the home. But programming is a big thing, and I think that it goes on forever sometimes, because what they initially thought they wanted 3 months after using it, while the integrator's still there, it changes. And it's like, you know what, let's do this, let's do that. So I guess you have to have, because I'm not an integrator, but, you know, a defined, you know, scope of work, and when that scope of work is done, and then what do you want to change 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road? That's an added cost possibly, or something. I don't, you know, that's after CO, generally those costs, you know, 3, 6, 9 months down the road don't funnel through me anymore. So it's directly between the homeowner and the integrator. So
Yeah, I mean, and we have processes, right? I mean, what we found is that, you know, someone's definitely, like on the onset of when we first started doing lighting control systems, it was, you know, let's do an entertainment scene and let's do a bedtime scene and all of this different stuff. But that has a different definition for everybody, right? So typically when we're doing this initial overlay of the house, it's really simple. There's a button for recessed lights, there's a button for sconces, there's a button for under cabinet lights, whatever. It's essentially just a condensed gang of switches, right? And we found that that's a really good place to start. And, you know, people just want something that's easy to use. So when they ask for all this complicated stuff, we're kind of like, hey, listen, we do this every single day. Like, we have people that all they do is program lighting control systems. So let's let the professionals handle it, and then we can adjust accordingly after.
So programming has been around for a long time. I know it's evolving and getting better, but really I think the changes to the lighting systems that we install now, not just the control systems, the light fixtures themselves, we're now able to create things we couldn't create before with light. Right? We can put lights in different places than we could before because they're smaller. We can change the color of the light. We can change the impact of that. I'm cheating a little bit here because Greg and I work on a project where we've done this, but does visualization in any format assist in that project or in that process?
I mean, we have architects that use like VR and stuff like that. Most of the time they're not putting in like the lighting spec files, like the iOS files, but it definitely helps. Yeah, and the better the renderings, the clearer the client expectations become. So yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly very important.
Greg, you said it, that they get there and don't know what they were getting until they get there.
Yeah, right. I mean, it made a huge difference with the process we're going through right now with that client, and just being in a rendered room or whatever with artwork, on the wall, and just changing temperature of that light and being able to see that, virtually makes a big difference. It's a big, big impact for that owner to understand how important that is, removing shadows, and stuff like that, just by doing certain little tweaks to the lighting plan. But I think, that impact of light on a room that they're looking at in a virtual environment is very powerful. So
yeah, and also a good way to mitigate that is, higher end fixtures allow for all of this flexibility, right? And a lot of times a client decides to go that route because they don't want to make those decisions up front, right? We have a client who, was picking a $1,000 recessed can throughout their whole house because the wife wanted 2700 Kelvin and the husband wanted 3000 Kelvin. So every room you go in, there's 2 buttons, and that's what they do throughout their whole house, right? So that flexibility can be built into the fixture up front, but it comes at a cost.
But it feels like, and I tend to do this at these sessions, kind of drift into the future a little bit, that we can use renderings and augmented reality settings and some artificial intelligence on the programming side to make the experience better. And I think we can get closer to finish that way, because I think that the biggest issue that I've experienced is that we never feel like we're finished, or the clients never feel like we're finished, because they can't define finished. It was hard for us at the beginning of the process to explain what they were going to be getting. If we did a good job explaining or showing, they may not have completely understood, and then we get there and they want to tweak that. So are you seeing advancements in product and lighting technology that's going to make this better?
I mean, with fixtures, yeah, definitely. I mean, you can essentially tune all aspects of light with a really high-end fixture, right? And some people really value that flexibility. But again, it's still emerging, it's still really expensive, so it's not for everybody.
How do you handle the tweaking process? Are you adjusting fixtures when you get there?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go in and aim fixtures. That's a huge part of it. If you have a really beautiful lighting design and no one comes in to aim the fixtures, that's a problem. It's not what the client asked for. It's not a finished product.
What's been your experience, Greg? Do most of your lighting people come in at the end of the job and tweak and adjust and fix, or are they sort of walking away and on to the next job?
I don't know if they're lighting, but it's definitely the integrators. We
Yeah.
see them every day for the last 60 days and beyond. So they're always in there programming something. But future, talking about the future a little bit, I think what programming, you spend months and months of hours programming for weekend versus weekday, right? Here's what's going to happen on the weekday when we're at work. Here's what's going to happen at the weekend when we're home. And you program that all in, the entire house, spend all this time and energy doing it. And then what happens if the kids are off school on Tuesday?
Yep.
The AI's got to be, hey, something's different here. We're gonna adjust our programming a little bit without the whole house going haywire, trying to figure out, how do I turn all the lights back on and put the shades back so we can go out to the pool? So we got to figure out a way to easily be adaptable to different scenarios than what's in the program.
Yeah. So that brings up a really good question. So there's so much capability now that didn't used to exist. Lighting control systems used to be programmed, or have historically been programmed, so you've got a recessed lighting button and a sconces button and a chandelier button because you're turning on lights and replacing switches. But now, not only do you have the light fixture itself, you've got the intensity of that light fixture to control, the dim level, if you will. You've got the color temperature of that fixture to control. If I wanted a button for pink, red, blue, and purple, that's 4 separate buttons I would need on my keypad. How do you navigate that?
So one way we've done that is, the stuff on the walls, right? That's everyday use, right? But a lot of these systems allow for digital keypads too, right? So for example, the all off by the garage, right? Everybody wants that. That doesn't need to live digitally on your phone or whatever it is, but most people aren't walking around their house using their phone to control it, right? Regardless of what integrators want you to think, most people just want to walk into a room and flip on a light switch. So that segues into like these specialty situations, right? So like I have a client that throws this really kick-ass Halloween party every year, right? And so he has a button on his phone specifically for that party, and all the lights in his house turn red and do whatever, right? But he only uses that button once a year. So I'm not gonna put that on the wall, right? I'm gonna let that live digitally. And so everybody that walks into his house knows how to control every room that they walk into.
So if I walk into my bedroom and push the button on the keypad that says bedroom to turn the lights in there, does it always do the same thing, or can you program it so it's different based on conditions?
It depends on what system you go with, but yes, right? So there's if then this programming, so at a certain time of year it could do something different, at a certain time of day it could do something different. But for the most part, we want it to do the same thing every time, right? That's just what people expect. So it's kind of, again, managing client expectations about like, hey, this is, you don't want to think about this every time you walk into a room. You just want it to do what you like. So what exactly is that, and that usually takes place on that second walkthrough where we're coming in and, fine-tuning the programming. And this sconce should be at 60%, and these lights should be at 30%, and whatever it is.
And the color changing fixtures, the circadian rhythm fixtures, sometimes the control system manufacturer that makes the keypad on the wall also makes the fixture. And I presume they put a lot of effort into making that programming and control very robust. But sometimes the fixture specifier, the lighting designer, is going to pick a different brand of fixture that might be controlled a different way. Is that a bad thing? Is it more difficult? Is it more expensive? Is it less optimal?
Typically, the programming with a system like the second one you described is more expensive, just because it's not proprietary. You're dealing with two different things that aren't necessarily designed to work perfectly together. So, in a perfect world, they're within the same manufacturer. And that goes for like fixtures too, right? Like most people aren't using $1,000 recessed light throughout their whole house. They might use that in a specific area, right? And you want to pick manufacturers that have a wide range of price points, right? Because there's no police that walk around and say this is 2700 Kelvin or this isn't, right? So if you go to a different manufacturer, they're not necessarily the same 2700 Kelvin as the other fixture, right? So you in certain instances like that, you want to try to stay within the same manufacturer.
So Greg, what's been your experience with this whole process? I know you said LEDs were flickering for you for a while. Dimming was a challenge. You were looking for 6-inch replacement cans. What's the best way to attack this now?
It's the lesson I've learned is just stay away from these new products that may not be around 5 years down the road. So we have a tendency to really encourage the major brands, and some of these major brands are buying up those smaller companies that are kind of pushing the limits, and I think that's okay because they're going to back that and be behind that. But we've put lighting systems in homes. We were talking about this PoE system that we did 4 or 5 years ago, and that company's been out of business for 3 years. So who comes back to service that? None of these LEDs are going to last forever. None of these lights are going to last forever. The homeowner's eventually probably going to sell a home, at one point. So who's actually going to come in and stand behind these technologies and this lighting that we're putting in there? So I like to stick to the major brands.
Perfect segue into support.
Yes.
So once we haven't defined finished, but let's say we finished. How do we support these systems over their lifespan? I mean, people are their lifestyle is going to change, their routines are going to change, their kids are going to get older, they're going to convert rooms into different, for different purposes and different sizes and shapes and colors. How do we support that?
It's a great question. Again, it's managing expectations, right? So all systems have updates, right? I mean, it just happens. You buy Sonos, and Sonos comes out with a new updated app, right? And from a longevity standpoint, right, you when managing these updates, right, a more complicated system with overlays and a home automation system involved, like Crestron or Control4 or whatever it is, you now have to wait for those systems to facilitate those updates. So we try to stay away from that stuff. We try to keep it as simple as possible with, systems that can have remote updates that the client can do themselves, or that, we can easily do remotely. But, service is a big part of these systems. And, we offer service contracts, right? Someone doesn't have to do it, but based on their past experience, if they want to, we facilitate that. If not, then it's, us charging a fee for whatever remote or on-site service we're doing. Warranties is a big thing, right? When does your warranty stop and the manufacturer's warranty begin? Where does, it's an assessment each time of what the issue is. Was it an installation error? Was it, a defect in the manufacturer? Whatever it is, it's really a case by case.
Well, the good news for everyone is that we're going to talk about this in detail in the next session at lunchtime. Yeah. So if you're awake for that one, you'll get to learn about that there too.
Yeah. And I would like to say also, the other big thing is, you want to pick systems that give clients the most control that you can, right? Not every client wants to do changes, but most clients don't want to call you every time they want to make a change. So it's really important to go with systems that you don't have to send someone on site to go fix.
How many of those phone calls do you get instead of going direct to the integrator?
Oh, we've built that out of our business. So yeah, the last thing I want is a phone call during the Super Bowl, because I'm watching the Super Bowl too. So I don't want to deal with that. But picking an integrator, a support team, or a support system on your team that has this ability to come in and fix issues long after we're gone, I think is important when you're selecting an integrator. It's like, okay, so what happens when we're all done? You've wired it up and it works, and you're getting paid, Now what happens, as the owners start living in the home as well? And so I think it's extremely important that your integrator have that technical support, long-term technical support.
As a designer, when you're not the integrator, are you involved in support and service after the sale, or you leave it at the integrator?
Typically, that's the integrator, right? In that instance, a lot of times we're offering, contract administration services and things like that, where we're like helping people pick which integrator they want to go with, and that's certainly part of it. A big thing is too standardization, right? Like when we do these systems, we're not reinventing the wheel for every job, right? We have a select menu of things that we, suggest using, and we do that for those reasons, right? They're easy to work with, they're reliable manufacturers, all of that stuff. So that's really important in the process.
Nice.
To get to your point, right? We recognized a need, right? And that need is the gray area that exists between fixtures, controls, shades, and technology, right? And so we've built our company around that, right? And what we do is we deal with, clients that have problems coordinating all of these systems. So how do we do that? Who are we, right? We design simple systems that are reliable and aesthetically pleasing. Now, everybody wants a simple system, right? Simple does not mean rudimentary, right? And that's where it gets complicated. A thermostat is a lot easier to use than a wood-burning stove, right? But a wood-burning stove is exponentially simpler, right? And that's a comparison that my CEO uses all the time. So we now live in this world of these super complex systems, and we're coordinating between all of these different people. So who's taking charge, right? Who's filling in those gaps and connecting the dots? What we've done is we've designed these clear deliverables, right? We didn't invent these, we didn't redesign the wheel, but we're applying this to this segment of the market where it previously didn't exist, right? How do we do that? Well, what we've done is we have, within these set deliverables of, schematic design, design development, implementation, a really set process, right? So when we're initially meeting with clients, right, this initial conversation is essentially figuring out if we're the right fit for the job, right? It's figuring out, what are their past experiences? What is their timeline? Do we actually want to work with these people? Because this is a long-term relationship, right? We're talking about service a lot and all of these different things, right? And this is something that even builders have to deal with. Homes are so complicated now that it's not just the house is done, you're constantly going back for whatever reason. And one way that we negotiate this process is this schematic software that I mentioned, right? So this is a super easy process where we just drag and drop icons on an uploaded PDF of the floor plan, right? They produce a fully weighted budget. This develops the client's final cost, right? This meeting could be, an hour, it could be 2 hours, but when they walk away from this, they have a full budget for automated window treatments, lighting control, shades, all of these different subsystems, right? And that frees us up. That gives us enough time, because that's so streamlined and they're so happy with this budget breakdown that's easy to read, that we can then go into actual design development drawings that give you guys the information you need. This gives the architect the information they need. This gives power and signal requirements, shade schedules, specified lighting fixtures, lighting schedules, right? That all correspond to schematic lighting drawings, right? They have load types, they have, rough size dimensions, right? Everything, shade details, all of this stuff that you guys are asking for that cause all of these problems, right? All exist within this document. Now, if we take that a step further, right, we're dealing with the MEP planners and making sure that, the BTU count in the mechanical space isn't too high, making sure that there's actual space for everything that we're doing. The electrician doesn't have to guess where to put all of these panels, right? This is all clearly defined. So that whole process is what gets us to the point where we don't have all of these questions on who's leading the process, right? Because we have a condensed set of drawings that's, the project's now using the architect's drawings and our drawings, right? There's very few questions that come out of that, hopefully. So, the project management is a streamlined process. And that brings us to, service and support. Like we said, the client's educated on the systems that we have, where we can implement changes remotely, all of these different things, right? So it's really just us filling in this gap in the market that you're talking about, where no one's taking the lead on managing all of these subsystems and becoming part of a team.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks to System 7 for sponsoring the event.